The order came down at dawn. Retreat. Every American soldier on top of the Maida Escarpment, a sheer 400-foot cliff the men had taken to calling Hacksaw Ridge, was told to pull back. The Japanese had counterattacked in the night. The position was lost. A Company had already been nearly destroyed taking it. The order was clear. Get off the ridge. One man did not move. He looked out across the plateau. 75 American soldiers lay wounded in the dirt, too broken to crawl to the edge on their own. He was unarmed. He had no weapon. He had never fired a rifle in his life, and he had decided that not a single one of those men was going to die alone on that ridge. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today we tell the true story of Desmond Thomas Doss. The year was 1945. The Pacific War was grinding toward its bloodiest chapter. American forces were pushing toward the Japanese home islands, and Okinawa stood in the way. A fortress island where Japanese commanders had spent years tunneling into the rock, building a maze of underground defenses designed to make every American advance cost more than the last. The 77th Infantry Division had been fighting across the Pacific since Guam in 1944. By the time they reached Okinawa, they were a seasoned, battle-hardened unit. They had seen everything the war could throw at them. They had never seen anything like Desmond Doss. Desmond Thomas Doss was born on February 7, 1919, in Lynchburg, Virginia, the middle child of William and Bertha Doss. His father was a carpenter who had come back from the Great War carrying wounds no doctor could see. His mother worked at the Craddock Terry shoe factory to keep the family fed. The Great Depression hit Lynchburg hard. Desmond left school after just 1 year of high school and went to work at the Lynchburg Lumber Company to help support the family. He was 14 years old. On the wall of the Doss home hung a framed picture of the 10 Commandments. Each commandment had a small illustration beside it. The sixth, "Thou shalt not kill," showed the image of Cain standing over the body of his brother Abel. Desmond stared at that picture for years. Then one night, the image almost came to life in front of him. His father, struggling with alcohol and rage, pulled out a .45 caliber revolver during an altercation with an uncle. Bertha Doss stepped directly in front of the gun. She took it from her husband's hand and gave it to Desmond. She told him to run and hide it. He did. And he made a decision that night that he would carry for the rest of his life. He would never touch a weapon again. By his early 20s, Desmond had become a deacon at the Park Avenue Seventh-day Adventist Church. He had a job as a ship joiner at the Newport News Naval Shipyard, a position that came with an automatic military deferment when the United States entered the war after Pearl Harbor. He turned it down. "I felt like it was an honor to serve my country according to the dictates of my conscience." He enlisted in the United States Army on April 1, 1942. He was 23 years old. He had no intention of carrying a rifle. He wanted to save lives, not take them. The Army was not prepared for that answer. From the first day of basic training, Desmond Doss was a problem. He refused to handle a weapon. He refused to perform duties on Saturday, his Sabbath. He would not train on the day the Bible set aside for rest. No matter the order, no matter the consequence, his commanding officers tried everything. They assigned him the worst details. They had fellow soldiers mock him, pressure him, threaten him. Bunkmates threw boots at him in the night while he knelt beside his bed in prayer. Some men called him a coward to his face. One commanding officer, Captain Jack Glover, wanted him removed from the unit entirely. He tried to have Doss discharged on the grounds of mental illness. The discharge was denied. Doss refused to quit. He appealed his case through the chain of command, citing his legal right as a conscientious objector to serve in a non-combatant role. The Army eventually reluctantly agreed. He would serve as a combat medic in Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment. He would go into battle unarmed. By the time Company B shipped out for the Pacific, the men around him had quietly stopped mocking him. They had watched him train harder than anyone. They had seen him tend to 6 soldiers in the barracks without being asked. They had noticed that the man who would not touch a rifle would do absolutely anything else asked of him, without complaint, without hesitation. They did not know yet what he was capable of. Company B fought on Guam in 1944, then Leyte in the Philippines, where Doss contracted tuberculosis in the jungle. a disease that would take one of his lungs years later. He kept that information to himself and stayed in the fight. Then came Okinawa. April 29, 1945, Company B climbed cargo nets up the face of the Maeda Escarpment, a sheer 400-foot cliff above the coastal plain of southern Okinawa. At the top waited thousands of Japanese soldiers entrenched in a network of tunnels they had spent years building. The Americans called the plateau Hacksaw Ridge. By May 2nd, A Company had been nearly annihilated. Company B moved up to the top of the cliff on the same day. Desmond Doss climbed with them, unarmed, carrying only his medical kit, his Bible, and the rope knot his mother had taught him as a boy. For 3 days, Company B fought across the top of the escarpment. The Japanese had tunnels everywhere beneath them. Defenders would emerge, attack, and disappear back underground. Artillery came from directions that made no sense. Men fell in open ground with no warning. Doss moved through all of it without a weapon. He crawled to wounded soldiers under fire. He dragged them to cover. He dressed wounds while bullets hit the ground around him. On May 5th, he advanced with the attackers through concentrated Japanese artillery and heavy weapons fire to assist a wounded officer. Administering plasma in the open, exposed while shells landed 30 yards away. That same day, the order came to retreat. Here's where it gets strange. Desmond Doss looked at the 75 men still lying on the ridge. He turned and walked back toward them. What he did over the next several hours has no reasonable explanation. One by one, he carried wounded American soldiers to the edge of the 400-foot cliff. He had learned a special rope knot, a double bowline knot, that allowed him to lower a man down the cliff face safely while he held the line from the top. He tied it around each soldier. He lowered them down one at a time into the hands of men waiting below. He did this 75 times. Each trip took him back across open ground that the Japanese held. Each lowering put him at the edge of a 400-foot drop, with nothing between him and the valley but a rope he had tied himself. He worked through the heat of the day, through the evening, and into the night. Soldiers later reported that he was out there in the dark, moving between bodies, checking for the living. At night, that's when Desmond done a lot of his work, one soldier said afterward. He'd go out and crawl around amongst our boys and see if they wasn't dead. He'd take care of them, drag them back. He wasn't supposed to do it at night. He had been warned he could be shot by friendly fire in the darkness. He kept going. 75 men came off that ridge alive because of what one unarmed medic chose to do on a day he was ordered to leave. The Americans eventually retook Hacksaw Ridge. The fighting continued for weeks. Desmond Doss stayed with Company B. On May 21st, during an unsuccessful night raid, he was hiding in a shell hole with 2 riflemen when a Japanese grenade landed at his feet. The explosion sent shrapnel tearing through both his legs and up into his hip. He treated his own wounds in the dark. Then he waited 4 hours for litter bearers so as not to expose anyone else to fire. When they came for him, he saw another more seriously wounded soldier nearby. He slid off his own stretcher and told them to take that man first. While making his way to the aid station, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. He broke off a rifle stock he found on the ground and used it as a splint. He kept moving. In October 1945, surgeons removed the bullet from what remained of his arm. He was taken directly from the operating table to Washington, D.C. On October 12, 1945, President Harry S. Truman placed the Medal of Honor around Desmond Doss's neck in a ceremony at the White House. Truman looked at him and said, "I consider this a greater honor than being president." Doss was the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. He was 26 years old. Captain Jack Glover, the officer who had tried to have him discharged as mentally unfit, was asked about Doss after the war. "He was one of the bravest persons alive," Glover said, "and then to have him end up saving my life was the irony of the whole thing." 2 weeks after the White House ceremony, Desmond Doss took a bus home to Lynchburg, Virginia. There was a parade. People lined the streets, but the town moved on, as towns do, and Doss spent the next 5 years not celebrating. He spent them in hospital beds. The tuberculosis he had caught in the jungles of Leyte cost him a lung and 3 ribs. He underwent surgery after surgery. He learned to live at diminished capacity in a body the war had slowly taken apart. He never complained about it. He said he was grateful to be alive. He moved eventually to Apopka, Florida, then to Piedmont, Alabama. Small towns, quiet lives. He raised one son, Tommy, who grew up hearing his father's story, not from newspapers or documentaries, but at the dinner table, told plainly, without drama. The picture of the Ten Commandments followed him to every house he ever lived in. On March 23, 2006, Corporal Desmond Thomas Doss died at his home in Piedmont, Alabama. He was 87 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Chattanooga National Cemetery in Tennessee. In 2019, the United States Army renamed its health clinic at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, in his honor. The city of Lynchburg now observes October 12th, the day Truman put that medal around his neck, as Desmond T. Doss Day, every year. He never fired a rifle. He never changed his faith. He never stopped believing that saving a life was worth more than taking one. America still stands because of men like this.